I think there's two. One is in motor vehicles. For fuel cell vehicles with hydrogen as the fuel, um, the idea being is that even if you make hydrogen in a non-green way, the local pollution is reduced because the only product of the process is water.
Yeah.
Um, so I think in transport, in particular, what's called light vehicle transport, not cars to you and me, and it might not just be hydrogen. It might be hydrogen with a battery, so it might be what's called a hybrid. So it's not going to be monolithic. It's very unusual to have something just with a single fuel, and you might even have a hybrid with fossil fuel,
Mm.
like you have with the battery cars. You can have a sort of fossil fuel or petrol engine or diesel engine. So I think transport, and the other one is using hydrogen to store excess renewable electricity. Wind and wave and solar don't always produce electricity when you want them, when you want it. And so if you could perhaps electrolyse water or some way use a conversion process to generate hydrogen, store it for when there's not much power being generated by wind or solar. The technology of hydrogen fuel cells is fairly well established, I would say. That we're talking of low temperature polymer electrolyte membrane fuel cells. So you know there are different kinds of fuel cells, so you have to be a little bit careful because there are very high temperature fuel cells that would be very difficult to integrate into a motor vehicle. So coming back to your question, I think that cost is going to be an issue. Reliability, these things can't just start every other day, they've got to be consistent. They do use expensive catalyst systems inside them and also very sensitive to contamination. As you know, platinum or palladium catalysts can be extremely sensitive to things like carbon monoxide, and it completely ruins the catalytic activity. So there are aspects such as the cost, reliability, how they cycle when you use them, and of course the storage issue, which is where my main research is storage. At the current state of the art, it's 700 bar tanks. The pressure in your car tire is about 2 bar.
Okay.
So we're talking of something 350 times the pressure in your car tire. So there are all sorts of issues with this very high pressure gas, and of course hydrogen is is a combustible gas. So there are issues to do with storage, and also how you produce it. But I would say cost, reliability of hydrogen fuel cell systems in transport is a particular issue. But that will come down once the infrastructure gets developed and you understand the technology. Cost tends to come down. I think we always need to be careful of safety, especially in the public domain. And what I would say about hydrogen, it's been used for many years as a chemical reactant in oil refining and ammonia synthesis. So people know how to manage hydrogen safely. And one person said to me recently, "Isn't hydrogen explosive?" I said, "Well, yes, it is, and that's why it's useful as a fuel, because it is a combustible gas. In a fuel cell, it's not combustion, but it has a lot of that chemical energy attached to it when you oxidize it. And so I think that while you have to be very conscious of safety, I don't think that there are long-term issues with managing safety, except with things like having a hydrogen car in a garage, because if there's a leak in an enclosed environment, there's a real potential for an explosion. Well, that's the same with methane.
Mm.
It's the same with even diesel or petrol. So you do have to be careful, but I would say there's a legacy of very careful management of hydrogen in an industrial context. We just have to make sure that's managed very carefully in a public context. That's a very good question. A simple one is electrolysis of water using renewable electricity,
Mm.
actually. But unfortunately, electrolyzers are not always, they can be sensitive to the water, the composition of the water used. Saline water is not always easy to electrolyse. You do have to deliver the electricity quickly to the water, otherwise if it goes down a grid line, you lose power. You can produce hydrogen from biomass, but that's not easy. It's not easy, it tends to be closely packed in these structures, so getting hydrogen out of biomass is not easy. The current technique is called steam methane reforming,
Yeah.
which is where it's high temperature reaction of steam and methane, natural gas, and that's the main industrial route now. Even now, if you have a fuel cell car, almost certainly the hydrogen's from steam methane reforming.
Mm.
And you could say, well, we could still have steam methane reforming with carbon capture, to mitigate the carbon problem. But then what do you do with the carbon dioxide?
Yeah.
So there are people interested in your department actually in converting carbon dioxide to a synthetic fuel
Yeah, or polymers even.
or to chemicals. But if we're thinking in energy terms, a fuel's a natural thing to do. So CO2 plus hydrogen could go to a hydrocarbon.
Yeah.
It's not thermodynamically a useful thing to do, but it recycles the CO2. So I think actually electrolysis is an interesting and easy one to suggest, but you have to be quite careful with the technology on that. It could make hydrogen expensive, and at least initially.
Mhm.
It's a good question. At the moment, the current state-of-the-art storage of hydrogen in a motor car is 700 bar. There are challenges with that. One is the cost of compression. One is the materials that you need to contain that hydrogen at those high pressures. They can be very expensive. And I'm not so sure that charging up a tank, you have to charge it up with a tank at even higher pressure, so 1,000 bar, to get it into the tank. So what I'm looking at is alternative routes to store hydrogen. So our idea is we can either drop the pressure, which could help with reducing the investment costs in the tank, make it safer as well, or you could get more hydrogen for 700 bar. And actually, industry are interested in the latter, not the former, because they reckon it's safe enough. So dropping the pressure might be okay, but why not get more hydrogen for your money? And in fact, the material we're looking at is called PIM1, but you can form it as a polymer. You make films out of it or structures, and we're working with Andy Burrows and a colleague in mechanical engineering called Chris Bowen on how we can engineer these materials to integrate inside tanks.
And is that a sustainable polymer?
It's an interesting question. The way we look at it is that what we want to do is to investigate whether there's a candidate material out there that could do the job, and then we start to look at things like cost, how you can make it, whether the reagents are sustainable, whether we can reduce solvent use. I think that's the way you do it. Otherwise, I'd rather solve the problem of storage and then worry about the other elements, toxicity, recyclability. But if it turns out that solvent use is excessive, then there's another challenge to try and find another polymer that has the same structure but with less solvent use or with more benign reagents. That's the way to look at it. If you didn't do that, if you said, oh, I can't do this because it will be too expensive, we may get to a point and say, look, we can't use this material, but it could be used as a basis or a template for another kind of polymer that would be more benign.
Oh, thank you very much, I think.